let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaming and everything in its orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. So today we are going to be talking about collaboration versus curation.
That's right, and I feel like it's really important to kind of highlight these two separate concepts, right?
Yeah.
Because, most of us who engage in the community do so kind of outside of, the typical gainer spaces. We're on Instagram, we're on Tumblr, we're on Twitter, and, within the sort of communities that spring up in these places, there is oftentimes blogs dedicated to bellies and to gainers, and many of us follow these, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Silver Daddies, Big Bear Belly Boys, hashtag tag them if you know them, But I think when we begin to look at it, there's two very distinct categories, and those are curation blogs and collaboration blogs. And I think we can easily distinguish these two because one is a concept that really lends itself to lifting up and celebrating different categories of human, right? Whether that's within the gaming or outside of it, right?
Yeah.
And then you get the ones that they just take photos from people without consent, or they take it from blogs online or from Google image search, and they just post it, and then that's kind of where it's left, right?
Yeah.
So to kind of kick things off, I want to ask you, what non-gainer specific platforms have you existed on in the past?
Non-specific?
Yeah, so like aside from Grommr, Beefy Frat, what platforms are you on that you post gainer content?
Currently?
Well, just in the past.
Oh God, how much time do we have? Because remember, I'm old, so I was making cave paintings.
I was about to say she was doing cave paintings, she was doing stone etchings. She remembers when they first introduced printed paper to the press, and she said, "Children today don't know the hard-earned victory of chiseling words into a stone tablet. They can just write on paper with ink. They'll lose the meaning of language. It'll be the death of Latin as we know it."
For context, listeners, I was born in the 80s, okay?
Yeah, the 1380s. Okay, bitch, we know the truth.
Oh, so I mean, I was on mostly gainer specific stuff. I mean, Belly Builders, Gainer Web, Super Chubs for a minute there, but that was a really weird website. That wasn't even, I don't know. That's like, I wouldn't even call it a dating website. Bigger City, shit. What else? The original Beefy Frat, thousands of Yahoo groups.
Well, I think that's a good place to start, right? Like Yahoo groups. And I think if I reflect on some, I used to post on YouTube, Tumblr back in the day. I had a Twitter at one stage. I used to send out stuff on Snapchat when I was using that for a brief spell. Like there are forums, and I think there are also like belly groups on Facebook now. So it's kind of like any social media platform on the internet, and we have talked about social media platforms in the past, but everywhere kind of has some form of gainer presence, right? Just whether
even Flickr. I forgot about Flickr. They have a gaining presence too.
Fully that Reddit, I think everyone, everywhere, gainers, we're there, I think it just depends on what maybe suits you. But I'm curious, of these sites, which ones have you intentionally left and why?
I guess the only one I intentionally left, and I haven't really like deleted the profile, I just don't really go on it ever, is Bigger City, because historically gainers don't really have much of a presence on I mean, it's not that they're not there, they are, but the focus of Bigger City is on the chub chaser community, and not all chubs are very like happy with the gainer presence on their website. They kind of feel like that's encroaching on their thing.
Yeah.
So
no, I get that. That's its own episode. that we will
Yeah.
come back to at some point in the future.
Oh, and Fantasy Feeder, because Fantasy Feeder was mostly, it seemed to be aimed at a heterosexual audience, which I don't have an issue with. It's just that, like, I wasn't going to find what I was looking for necessarily on Fantasy Feeder.
Right. I suppose when I sort of focus in on this question, for me, I think when I posed the question to myself, like I deliberately left Snapchat, and that was because I found that a lot of the people that I'd started connecting with were like screenshotting my pics and
Mm,
saving them. And that made me feel uncomfortable because, obviously on different social media platforms, you learn to post a different vibe and energy of your vibe. Like I primarily post on Instagram now, which is still showy, but not showing everything. Whereas Twitter, oftentimes you can kind of show everything and mostly get away with it, you
yeah.
know? And I found on Snapchat, obviously, images that are deleting themselves immediately, I was showing a lot. And seeing people screenshotting things made me feel very, very uncomfortable. And especially around that time, I'd begun to notice, the sort of emergence of the curation blog,
Hmm.
blogs where they seem to have really nice resolution photos of gainers, but no tags, no sourcing. And there's this huge question of like, did they give this to you to post or did you just kind of take it? Because, and this is where I say curation, right? Because if you think of a museum, which is a form
Yeah.
of curation, right? It is oftentimes precious artifacts and wonderful treasures from all over the world that have been pinched without the consent of its owners, placed in a little area, put on display for all to see. And then that institution, and in this case, we're talking like Great British Museums of whatever, often
Yeah.
gets millions of pounds in government funding and donations and people because look at all the wonderful work that they've done, when in fact, the only thing they did do was go out and actually steal people's shit.
Yeah.
And the value of the shit that got stolen is often lost. And they talk about these ancient civilizations as if their descendants are not there today, saying, "Hi, hello, Queen of England is now dead. Give us back the Kainor, please.
Hmm.
Biggest diamond in the world. We would like it back. It came from us in India and Pakistan, and we would like it back." But we're not talking about that today. But my
Well,
point.
it's funny. It's funny that we're talking about this, like this pilfering idea, because I just had this happen to me recently, and I showed you the video I
Mm,
found on this vid. There's a video of me giving some belly worship to somebody, and I didn't expect it to wind up somewhere, and I don't care. Like, I'm honestly not at all disturbed by the fact that it wound up somewhere that without my permission, because I'm kind of at this point in my life now where anything that I allow to be put out on the internet, I've already approved of, and I don't actually care if it winds up somewhere else. Like, I'm to the point where, like, nothing that I don't want people to, or nothing I wouldn't be comfortable with them seeing, it's never gonna leave my phone, essentially.
right. I get that, and it can be confronting, I think, because I think that's my question really. Like, what has been your experience with these blogs, like curation blogs as an experience, and
Mhm.
collaboration blogs? What have been your experiences with these?
I've had both happen. Like, I've had my photo wind up on a curation place, like either Instagram page or on a Tumblr or something like that, without actually being asked. And as I said, it doesn't bother me, but that's me. I've already known that anything that I put out there, I put out with intention, so I don't care where it winds up. I can see how that would really upset other people. The only thing that kind of irks me is when someone will pilfer one of my pictures and use it for their profile pic, and then I'll have to like message them and be like, "Hey, I'm flattered, but you didn't ask for my permission, and this isn't you. So maybe don't use my picture because that kind of makes me uncomfortable." And I have yet to have anyone say, "Well, fuck off, I'm going to do it anyway." They're usually like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." They immediately change it. And then I've been a part of collaboration efforts too, where someone's like, "Hey, I will shout you out. I will put one of my favorite pictures of you on this page because, like, this is what I'm all about. I'm all about promoting." So I'll be like, "Yeah, sure. Either pick whichever one is your favorite, or I'll send you another one." And as long as I get tagged and get credit for the fact that it's my image, I, again, don't care.
So, I mean, kind of centering on, let's say, these curation blogs to start with. I gave the example of the pilfering and the stealing and the lack of consent. I think we see a lot of this on Tumblr and Instagram especially, and a lot of people follow them. And sometimes I find that I end up following these blogs, because you see the content, you don't necessarily look at the tags, you don't necessarily look at the
Yeah,
timestamps.
you may not necessarily know exactly what the point of the page was. You just saw pictures of things that you liked. So you were like, oh, well, maybe I'll follow this and see what else comes up.
Hmm.
I've done it too. I think everyone has, unwittingly. And then it's like once you find out what the intent of the page was, then it's like the question of I like the content, but it's not theirs, this moral dilemma thing.
Hmm.
Because I think I follow one that now, but I've actually talked to this guy, and I remember asking him, like, how do you source this stuff? And he's like, it's stuff that's already out there, online, available all the time. This isn't something that I'm necessarily like. It's like in the realm of the public civilian world, not specifically
Right.
gainers. It's like civilian stuff almost. And he says that he sources it from the world, essentially, the World Wide Web where all these things are available. So,
I don't know. I think we've spoken about this before, and again, I can't remember if we specified this on the podcast or just us talking. But I think certainly Tumblr days. Actually, do you know what? Wind it back a bit. Let's think about days prior to Grommr and prior to this sort of like explosion of profile and presence in the online
mhm.
community. I'd explained previously when I first started looking at stuff when I was a certain age, there were only two names on the internet, Get Bigger and Fat Fan Plus,
Yep.
because no one else had figured out how to make a WordPress and no one else was really public enough with their presence online to talk about it because
Mhm.
they just weren't. The number of gainers that I knew of in existence was precisely two. So when
Yeah.
it came to jack off content, I was totally looking through the internet archives. I was looking at Google image searches. I was looking at news articles where fat people were being shown. And I didn't find a problem with kind of hoarding this imagery like a dragon guarding his treasure because I was like, I have to do this. This is the stuff I like, and it is nowhere else to be found. Whereas now that we have this boom that's occurred, and it's not even a new boom, it's a boom that's like 10 years old now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's plenty of actual gainers and people who've actually put on the weight consensually and for the explicit purpose of being appreciated and worshipped, that we should have transitioned to this place of, you know, sourcing our porn in-house, sourcing our
Yeah.
appreciation and value in-house, I think when I think about the majority that I see of like fat people in the world being presented online, it's never positive and it's never consensual. Like I always
Yeah.
think of articles or think of programs on TV where they talk about obesity. You have headless bodies of fat backsides and wobbly fronts
Mhm.
because they are quite literally dehumanizing the person.
Yeah.
They are fully prepared to put this freak, quote unquote, on show and do everything but show the face.
And then when they do interview someone who is obese, there's always this like the music selection that they use. It's not flat out circus music, but it's in this very whimsical sort of space where it almost sounds like they're trying to make fun of the person. It's like and you think, well, what does that have to do with anything? Like, why is that important? Because when people produce film, television, whatever, music is like another character, and the music can often like be leading the audience into how they're supposed to feel about whoever's on screen. They do that a lot with obese people. They'll put like this,
Tuba music,
yeah, you know what I'm
puppy
talking about.
track.
Yeah,
I
this
mean,
sort of like
we
no, go ahead.
what was it we watched? That fucking piss poor excuse for a documentary where it was quite literally they had a fat activist literally just explain, the whole premise of fat liberation is, it really doesn't matter about health or about any other talking points because all we're really saying is please stop treating us like shit. Like, if you really wanted us be happy, surely you'd be supporting us to get better, not
Mhm.
bullying us to quote unquote get better. And this person said, yeah, it seems like she's making a fair point, but I wonder why people would bully fat people. Oh, right, because they're fat and unhealthy. And then proceeded to post all of this like false imagery to like comedic music. And it's just like, there is a 0% existence of like positive gainer representation
Yeah,
anywhere
I know.
outside of our community, period. Because even hard fat was done with the perspective of being like a from the community thing. Turns out it wasn't. It was a whole thing. Listen to our special, talking to Emma Gut Muscle on that one. But yeah, like there's none of that, you know. But we have nearly 100,000 people on Grommr. There's thousands of people on Instagram and Twitter, and people still use Tumblr for God knows what reason. But you know, people are out here. People are making content. We don't need to be stealing stuff and hoarding it. And again, I think when people do these curation blogs, the vibe I get is that they're kind of patting themselves on the shoulder because they themselves aren't necessarily gainers, in my experience,
Yeah.
but they are, by virtue of posting gainer content, trying to receive the accolades of gaining. Gainers get that by
Okay.
going and posting their content. I get claps and likes because you're getting fat and we like that. And I go, yay, I feel good. People like what I'm doing. People who aren't gainers mostly don't get that, which also includes encouragers and actual feeders, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So it doesn't surprise me that there is this desire to take content, even if it's not gainers, it's just fat boys throughout the internet, and presenting it in such a fashion that it also garners a sense of followership and like and engagement, because
Mhm.
maybe that's what people are after, a desire to
Well, and
experience it.
I also think that you know, I'm sure a few out there, it's a sort of naive innocence, like that I love this, so other people might love this, so I want to share what I love with other people. Like I don't put that like out of the realm of possibility either.
Hmm. But then I think versus collaboration blogs, and this is, I think, a fantastic opportunity, and especially considering constructs like intersectionality and diversity, because we have spoken about this before on our BLM episode, and we also know this in the wider gainer community. We have a love and a fascination with the white man, and we cannot help ourselves with the ex-jock. We love hairy men, we love masculine men. But what about Black, Asian, Latina, and Indigenous? What about trans? What about women? What about smooth, chubby bodies? What about shorter people? What about femme? What about hyperqueer? What about non-binary? These are all persons who deserve accolade in our community, and we rarely give them the time of day because you're not what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So a collaboration blog, especially one who is with the intent and purpose of focusing on diverse individuals, can be a fantastic vehicle to really uplift marginalized members of our community and highlight beautiful diverse bodies, you know?
Hmm.
So I do think to myself, what is the intent? Is the intent to uplift other people with collaboration, or is the intent to uplift the self with curation?
Yeah.
So that's where
No, good point. That's a very good point.
I mean, you spoke on it a little bit. I'd like to know a little bit more. What do you think goes on, in your opinion, behind the scenes for people who run these curation blogs?
Well, like I said, I don't. It's not impossible that some of them are very innocently like, I love this, and so I want to share what I love with other people. And I'm sure that there is another contingent that was like you said, where it's because they may not be a gainer themselves, or they wouldn't get the attention, you know, when they post their own bodies. So they're like, well, I'm, you know, curating this to like feel as, I mean, because people who are not the gainers, I'm sure they feel left out. Like how many times have we said encouragers feel left out of the conversation, feeders, admirers, skinny people feel left out of the conversation? So you know, they're trying to grab at whatever they can in those situations. I mean, it's kind of inevitable. um and then I'm sure that there's a contingent of people who just don't give a shit either way, and it's just they want to do this because they want to do this, you know.
Yeah. I do want to ask, like, when it comes to, maybe focusing on the collaboration element of it, and yeah, I said that it's really great when there's opportunities focused on diversity. Um, in my experience, it doesn't tend to be that way. It does tend to be more open form. Like it's not about, gatekeeping necessarily. But I wonder, like, do you feel like from the collaboration blogs that you've seen, do you feel like they run the risk of being cliquey or like having that sense of gatekeeping to them?
I mean, I'm sure that's going to probably happen no matter what. I think it's just sort of the human nature to end up becoming clicky, and people might even gatekeep without realizing that they've done it. I just feel like it's inevitable, honestly. yeah, we work to try to go against that, but like I said, human nature, I feel like it's going to happen one way or the other.
Yeah. I do have a question, and it's actually a question from a listener that I'd be curious to
Yeah.
ask you. As a content creator, how do you best protect yourself from content curation?
That's a very good question, and honestly, I don't know if I have a good answer for it because you can take pictures off of Grommr, you can take pictures off of Tumblr, there are ways of downloading content from OnlyFans, there are ways of downloading content from Patreon. There's always a loophole, there's always a way around things for people to take what you want or what you've created, whether you want them to or not. And like on clips for sale, for instance, like you purchase that clip. I mean, you don't own the copyright, but you own the video now. It's on your hardware, it's on your, space. Now you can pretty much do whatever the hell you want with it.
Mm.
And so I guess the real advice is don't put anything out there that you're not absolutely sure that if it wound up somewhere that you were, not like, say if it wound up on Twitter somewhere or some obscure blog somewhere, if you wouldn't be comfortable with what you put out there being discovered and placed somewhere else, then don't put it out there at all.
It's funny, even as I asked the question, that because you said that before, that's exactly what came to my mind. There is no real guaranteed 100% foolproof gold star way to stop your shit from being stolen. I mean, look at the extent that Netflix and Disney Plus and Amazon Prime go to protect their own streamed products. They make it so
Yeah.
that if you try to screen share or screen grab, it's a black screen. I don't know how they do it. That's magic. I'd love it if they introduced that to social media.
Oh,
But
wouldn't that be amazing if they could do
oh my
like
God,
offer you that level of privacy?
that would be phenomenal. But that's not what we have. We
No.
have the platforms we have. Like,
Because even if you set your Twitter profile, your Instagram profile, everything to a setting where you have to approve the person before they can see it, you may approve them thinking, "Oh, this person looks legit. This person looks like they're on the level. Looks like they won't do it." And you don't know what other people are going to do. You just don't.
mm, it's hard to know. But I think what you said is absolutely right. You have to be comfortable with what you put out there on the internet. And weirdly enough, I reflect on, like, the kind of shit that my mum used to say. Whatever you put on the internet, it's there forever. Just be aware of that. But she's
Hey
not
man,
wrong.
my cock is out there on the internet and I have to live with it.
She ain't wrong. She ain't wrong, kids. So, it's things like that. Like, the internet is forever. Be mindful of that. But I hope that this opens up the conversation on, yes, how we have traditionally farmed for content outside of the community. Like, think of an analogy to do with fishing.
Mhm.
In the past, we have had to create nets and shallow shoals and all these like indigenous practices for like harboring fish to capture them and spear them and have them, and this is how we did the thing. And then we got so good at what we were doing that we were just overfishing. And then we had to put rules in place where we said, stop, we have to go after specific species at specific times of the year, and only when we know that the numbers are big enough that if we take a big portion, then we're not going to kill them all. Like, we need to be mindful of that. And I think that ultimately that's how we should approach like curation and collaboration. Because yes, the critique of curation is we really shouldn't be sponsoring the notion of taking people's content without consent. But also with collaboration, especially as a white creator myself, I should be really mindful about not always putting my face and image out there. And when I comment and like on a post and share a post to my stories, being mindful of what kind of bodies am I representing. When we have guests on this podcast, we always try to focus on the diversity. We always try to focus on getting as many different perspectives as possible because we want to make sure that what we're creating is something that truly is representative of the mass, which
Mhm.
is a wonderful, diverse amuse-bouche of the experience. Well, I guess that's a wrap for now here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave a good review. If you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BeefyFrat at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and Beefy Frat at Thicky Mouse. You can also look us up on TikTok at Thicc Radio or our website at www.podpage.com/Thicc Radio. And if you want to submit any questions or ideas for episodes, you can reach us at thiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by Stan and Thicky Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.